Good afternoon, guys, or good morning, I guess. Today, for our do now, you are going to write the name of this little guy here. This is my duck. His name is Atticus, all right? And you're going to write his name, okay? Spelling does count, and I'm going to show you exactly how to spell his name in just a second. Just so you guys know, sometimes he wears a bow tie, sometimes he doesn't. If you guys have a question, otherwise you can always pop that inside of the comments. That is totally okay as well of your Google Classroom, your lesson. And unfortunately, there's some thunderstorms outside right now, and he's really nervous and a little bit scared. He might not seem like it right now because he's a little happy being pet, like being pet. Yes, hi. But just so you guys know, if you do hear some noises or something like that, chances are it's him. He's having a little bit of a rough time right now. So just trying to be as supportive as I can of him, all right? So we're going to write his name, Atticus, down. Look at that. He's so happy. How can I stop petting him right now? All right. We're going to go ahead and spell his name right over here. And again, spelling does count. So once we write that, Atticus. Go ahead and write that down. And he's just going to hang out today for today's lesson. Again, if you have a question about it, you can go ahead and add that inside the comments of your lesson, and I'll definitely go ahead and answer that, or I'll do my best to. Now, today, we're going to go ahead and just get started. In order to help you focus a little bit, going to go ahead and just get rid of this video because we're going to have a lot of other slides going on instead. Today, we will be able to identify the properties of multiplication. Now, this is going to be very, very similar to yesterday's lesson, which was the properties of addition. So just make sure that if you have any questions, you can always reference that. It's going to be very, 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 very similar. And then we're going to build on this in the next couple of days, a little bit later on, okay? Again, today we are going to be talking about the properties of multiplication. The first property is called the commutative property. Go ahead and write that down, commutative property. And I want you to go ahead and take a look at this equation here and write down what is happening to these numbers. And then really think about what we did yesterday and comparing that to it. We have our 3 times 2 is equal to 2 times 3. Yes, the values are the same. 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 3 is 6. But beyond that, what is happening to these numbers? What do you see is happening inside of this equation? Go ahead and write something down. I'll give you a second here. Now, looking at exactly what's happening, this is very similar to yesterday. Our numbers are the same, right? We have our 3 and a 2, and then we have a 3 and a 2, but it's our order that's changing, right? We have our 3, it goes from the first number to the second one, and then we have our second number, which is a 2, and it moves to the first. So they just switch spots, right? So commutative, meaning they're moving. Just like yesterday, and just like we talked about yesterday, a lot of times commutative always means to move from one place to another or the distance traveled. But when you're talking to your family, your parents, and brothers, sisters, cousins, anyone, and you're asking them about their commute if they work every day, chances are they're going to think about when they go from their house to work, and also when they go travel from work back to the house. So if you look, the same thing is happening up here with our numbers. They're just moving. That is commutative, okay? So let's go ahead and just explain that in here if you haven't already. If you already used your own words, perfect. Otherwise, we're just going to say our numbers move. Our numbers are moving. That's it. Easy as that. Another example of this, again, this is with multiplication, so we're not using addition today, so we're sticking with multiplication. Another example could be something like 7 times 5 is equal to 5 times 7, right? The value is staying the same, the numbers are the same on both sides, but their order changes. They're moving around. Go ahead, take a minute to write that down. Just like always, if you are using a piece of blank paper, definitely do that. That's okay. You can write your answers down and then transfer them onto your Google document later. Our second property is called the associative property. Go ahead and take a second to write that down. Associative property. Now, let's look at our numbers here in our equation. What is happening to the numbers inside of that equation? Remember, really think about what we learned yesterday with the associative property with addition. It's going to be very, 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 very similar here. So thinking about what exactly is happening with these numbers, go ahead and write something down. I'll give you about 10 seconds to start thinking about that. Now, remembering that if we have our numbers here, we have a 3 times 2 times 5 and a 3 times 2 times 5. In our equation here, we also have those parentheses, and these parentheses are groupings, right? So we have a group of the 3 times 2 here, but it changes over here. Our grouping changes to 3 times 5. So we have one group over here and a second group over here. The groupings are changing. The associative property, they're associating with different numbers, right? And we learned about this just with different students. Who you sit next to in one class is not always the same as who you sit next to in another class, right? Who you sit next to in science might be different than who you sit next to in math or ELA. So again, our groupings are changing here. They're just switching around, but our numbers stay the exact same. Oh, goodness gracious, I just noticed something. If you notice, we have a 3, a 2, and a 5, and then a 2, a 3, and a 5. Mr. Duncan, let's go ahead and fix that real fast here. Let's just change our 3 and our 2 here. So if we have a 2 times 3, I apologize for that. I know if you're in class, someone would have raised their hand respectfully and explained that. So again, our numbers are staying the same. 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5. Okay. Again, just the exact same as yesterday. That's why I'm not going to go back and redo all this. But it's the exact same as yesterday. Our groupings are changing. We have one group and then we have another. It's just moving spots, okay? So again, thinking about exactly what's happening to the numbers stay the same. The parentheses changes. And again, I'm gonna fix this just like we did a second ago here. So again, the numbers stay the exact same order. Our grouping changes, right? So our parentheses are changing. That's all it's saying. Another example of this, I want you to go ahead and come up with your own example of how to go ahead or what another equation is. I'm not going to write that in for you. I want you to come up with your own. It needs to be using multiplication, okay? Give you about 10 seconds to start that. If you need more time, you can go ahead and pause it. We'll have about 10 seconds here. Now, moving on to our very last property. So our very last property is going to be called the identity property, just like yesterday. The identity property, and this one is also sometimes called, it's sometimes called the property of 0. Property of 0 or the identity property just means that we're multiplying times a 0 and that our answer is always going to remain a 0. All right. So I want us to go ahead and I want you to go ahead and write down what is happening to these numbers that you see. Go ahead, take a second to write down what you see happening with those numbers. I'm not going to write anything down, so you're going to have to come up with this on your own. I'll give you about 10 seconds to get started. Now, after that, we just need to come up with another example of what this actually is. Remember the identity property really being, again, looking at our example, 6 times 0 is equal to 0. Really being that any number times 0 is going to have a result of 0. It's going to have a product of 0. That value does change here. So, or, well, really our value is staying the same because times 0 is 0 here, right? So here it would just be like any number times 0. So any number that you would like is equal to 0. Property of 0 or the identity property here, okay? Go ahead, come up with your own example. Now, what's going to happen, just so you guys know, this is the exact same or the exact same idea as yesterday's work. For question 1, we're going to go ahead and say that which of these best describes what's happening in this equation, right? So does the commutative property thing, are numbers moving, right? Going from one place to another, changing order best describe it? Does the associative property best describe what's happening here, or the identity property? Here, if we look here, we have our 4 times 5 times 2 is equal to 4 times 5 times 2. We're going to go ahead and just write that down. We'll walk through one example. 4 times 5 times 2 is equal to our 4 times 5 times our 2. We'll notice that it's our parentheses that we also have here. So we have our parentheses, just looking at where those are going to be. Parentheses are right here. So thinking about our commutative property, are our numbers moving around? We have a 4, a 5, and a 2, and a 4, and a 5, and a 2. That tells us our order stays the same. It's not going to be associative. Let's take a look at our next two choices. We have either associative property or identity property, right? So here, associative property means to group. Are our groupings changing at all? Here we have a 4 times 5, and here we have a 5 times 2. Yes, our groupings are changing, right? That means it's the commutative property. Also, we don't have any zeros in here, which would automatically also make it the property of 0. So it's only going to be associative property here. Let's go ahead and write that down, associative property. Today, you're going to go ahead and continue this work on your own. After that, you're going to go ahead and complete today's exit ticket. Make sure you get that done as well. If you need any help, you know how to get a hold of me, Ms. Lamb, Ms. Bigley, Ms. J. So definitely reach out to one of us, ideally me first, if you guys have any questions. We talked about how to send text messages, but also how to leave or how to call using the phone and how to leave appropriate messages. So make sure that you are practicing those, okay? Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.